I'm Jennifer Matos with the Noah Webster House and West Hartford Historical Society, and I'm bringing you the 39th episode of the Armchair Tour of West Hartford history. Standing out here in the elements on Woodridge Lake, which is kind of one of West Hartford's best kept secrets. There's Woodridge Lake and Wood Pond, and together the houses that are in this area are organized into what's known as the Woodridge Association. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of this delightful spot in West Hartford. So the land, a lot of the land that encompasses today's Woodridge Association was once owned by a man named George Woodruff. And George Woodruff owned about 64 acres of land, including a brick and stone farmhouse that still stands at 129 Woodruff Road in Farmington. He left the land to his son William and his daughter Lucy, and they actually sold the land in May of 1912 to Fred Arnold of Trout Brook Ice and Feed. Very fitting to be talking about an ice company today as we stand in the snow, and you can see the lake behind me is partially frozen over. So there wasn't always a lake or a pond here, but Fred Arnold had a mind to create an ice pond here in this part of West Hartford. So Fred Arnold was the son of a man named Edwin Arnold, and he established Trout Brook Ice and Feed in 1879, and you'll recall we had a prior episode about Trout Brook Ice and Feed. They had set up a complex of company buildings off of Trout Brook, so near the intersection of Farmington Avenue and Trout Brook. And really, Trout Brook Ice and Feed was one of West Hartford's largest companies and the biggest business in the center in the late 1800s. So Edwin Arnold was a fairly wealthy farmer before he got started with this business. He had 5 children. Frederick was his youngest son, and eventually he would go into business with Frederick, who was called Fred. And business was good for Trout Brook Ice and Feed. During the ice harvesting season, a surge of workers would come from Hartford to harvest ice from the frozen over ponds. The ice was sawed into blocks, loaded into an ice house using conveyor belts and packed in sawdust to insulate it from warmer temperatures. The company employed huge red wagons to carry these ice blocks to homes in the area. In 1895, the company could boast more than 10 delivery wagons and 40 workers for delivery service that was guaranteed regular and exact. And Trout Brook Ice and Feed didn't just serve the greater Hartford area at its peak, it also shipped about 50 train car loads to New York City. So business was good, and Fred Arnold needed more ice. So in 1912, he purchased the land from the Woodruffs. This is land that used to be the middle road to Farmington, and his intent was to build another ice pond. He actually created a memorandum of agreement with the town of West Hartford with the purpose of constructing a large pond for the purpose of cutting ice, and to do this required flooding the land, which included an old road. So he agreed that he would create a substitute road and promised that it would be a more desirable road for travel than the one that had existed prior. He hired local farmers and their teams of horses to move soil from what was to be the lake bed, and they piled it along a proposed road area, which created a dike. A concrete conduit and spillway box was built with slotted columns as sides into which water level control boards could be placed. When the dike was completed, Arnold diverted the existing stream to go under the road and into the ice pond, and that would give him a good supply of water when he needed to fill the pond. The first time the ice pond was filled, the water rose above the dike and caused the neighboring farmer, Mr. Kulakowski's, cleared fields to be flooded. Needless to say, Mr. Kulakowski was not happy, and it stayed a stump-filled pond until many decades later when it was purchased by a man named Wallace Goodwin. We'll get to him in a little bit. Trout Brook Ice and Feed built ice barns and a conveyor system around the north end of Waterside Lane today. The barns were built of concrete and wood. As the ice was harvested, it was stored in both types of barns. The ice was always shipped from the wooden barns first, because the ice could be kept in a concrete barn for over a year. And this was a reserve supply for the next summer in case a mild winter prohibited cutting ice. The ice company also laid trolley tracks from the barns to the trolley tracks on Farmington Avenue so that ice could easily be shipped, as we said, not only to the greater Hartford area, but to New York City. During the harvest ice season, workers were brought in from Hartford by trolley carloads. A steam power plant was set up as part of the ice barn complex, and this provided power for the conveyors and big trimming saws which cut blocks of ice square to specified width, length, and height. And this was done so that they could fill the ice barns as efficiently as possible. Each barn had many insulated compartments so that emptying one did not result in the next one's melting. As increases in technology allowed for new refrigeration methods in the early 20th century, there was a chance that the ice industry would die out. However, when the United States entered World War I in 1917, the ice trade actually rebounded. The nation's existing refrigeration capabilities were challenged by increased shipments of chilled food to Europe during the war, and factories upped their production of munitions, which used up ammonia and coal that might have otherwise been used for refrigeration plants. So the ice industry was actually called upon during the war to relieve the refrigeration burden and to maintain adequate supplies. So World War I delayed the ice industry's collapse, but it could not prevent it. After the war, innovations in refrigeration began to be applied to domestic products, and eventually we had the invention of the ice box and the modern refrigerator. So in 1927, Fred Arnold sold Trout Brook Ice and Feed to the Southern New England Ice Company, and this included the lake, the ice barns, conveyors and systems, all ice tools, the trolley tracks and right-of-way, and 15 ice trolley cars. The property was in Farmington and partially in West Hartford, and Trout Brook Ice and Feed retained some land along today's now Ridgewood Road. In the 1930s, natural ice harvests declined dramatically. Ice warehouses were abandoned or converted for other uses. And the Southern New England Ice Company actually stopped their ice business in 1936, and they demolished any ice barns that were here on the property. But the ice pond that had been built by Arnold actually took on a new life when a man named Wallace Goodwin purchased it. So in 1936, Wallace B. Goodwin, who was from West Hartford, purchased the land around Wood Pond and Tunxus Roads from the Kulakowski family, including that stump-filled pond. He dreamed of creating a residential development that would offer seclusion but not isolation. The first house was built in the spring of 1937 for Charles Derrick and family, and that's 275 Ridgewood Road. And beginning in 1928, the Woodridge section developed rapidly. They used architect Norris Prentice with a builder named Charles Robinson to build the homes. Within 5 years, 44 homes had been sold. As for Mr. Kulakowski's stump-filled pond, in 1940, property owners pooled resources to pump the pond as dry as possible and to remove the stumps. They actually wanted to pull the stumps out, but the moistness of the ground prevented it, and so instead, they chainsawed off the stumps as close to the ground as possible and filled it, and that became today's Wood Pond. Goodwin purchased the old Trout Brook Ice and Feed pond, which is today Woodridge Lake, in 1941. In June of 1944, property owners drew up articles of association to create a homeowners association, which is today known as Woodridge Association, and it still exists today. Waterside Lane was accepted as a new West Hartford street in 1948 and Wood Pond Road in 1950. By 1950, 77 families lived in the area on both Wood Pond and Woodridge Lake, and it all got started thanks to Edwin Arnold's old ice pond. It's a beautiful place to live in all seasons, but on winter days like today, it's a great place for residents to be able to ice skate or play ice hockey or just enjoy the beautiful scenery that we have. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.